I'm a big fan of vertical flip phones like the Z Flip 5, but OPPO reached out because they wanted to showcase their new Find N3 Flip, and honestly, after looking at all the specs and features, this thing is very impressive. Holding both in my hand, they are both really comfortable. You guys can see that the Find N3 Flip does have a large display, so it's a little bit bigger of a phone. We also have some differences in bezels, and with the Flip 5, you have this kind of bezel that's dark, and then you see the screen protector right there, where on the OPPO, you actually don't notice it at all. Now, the other thing that I see is that the speaker grills on the OPPO are much larger. There's a lot more holes there. So we're gonna do a speaker comparison in just a little bit. And one thing that I noticed right away is the creases on the foldable screens here. On the OPPO, I cannot see it at all, even moving it around in the reflection, whereas the Flip 5, you definitely notice it. Now running my fingers across, I could tell that both of them have it, but the crease is super deep on the Flip compared to a very minimal one that you can barely feel on the OPPO, which is really nice. Now the OPPO has their Flexi on hinge technology. I really like that on the Find N2 Flip when I made a video about that one, but they have actually improved it even more. So it has 25% better load bearing strength, and it's very, very minimalistic, completely flat design. So it's more durable, up to 600,000 folds now, which will outlast the whole phone. Now, as far as the buttons, both of them do feel nice. They have your main buttons on the right-hand side. The OPPO has the power button a little bit lower than on the Samsung. But one thing I like is that the OPPO has a physical mute switch. So you can go to silent mode with vibrations, regular, and all the way to full silent just by adjusting this hardware switch. Now both these do still use SIM cards as well as eSIM, but the OPPO actually has dual physical SIMs and dual 5G connections, so you can be running those. So it's a nice little bonus if you need that. And looking at the back of the phones, we have quite a bit of design differences. Now I do like that the Flip 5 has this top section, it's all black, so that screen is kind of hidden there when it's shut off. But overall, I like the OPPO's design. It has this kind of pearl color that looks really nice with these thin accents on the hinge instead of being thick. You have the branding there. And one interesting thing is instead of just being flat on the back and the sides, we have this massive curve. I think it's the biggest one that you have with glass that curves into the edge, but then you still have this flat section right over here. And that makes the phone feel thinner overall. It just makes it slightly more comfortable than a boxy design. Now with that, you guys can also see the differences in the camera bump. The Flip 5 has two cameras right here. It's fairly small up in this corner, whereas the OPPO has this Hasselblad ring here that is thicker, has a nice little accent on the side. They call it the Cosmos ring design, and it kind of looks like a lens, and then you have three cameras in here. Now, probably the biggest limitation with vertical flip phones have been the cameras. Here we have two 12 megapixel cameras, a standard and an ultra wide, and then looking at the OPPO here, there's a reason why that module is so large. Now, this is the first vertical flip phone that has flagship level cameras. It's also the first one that has triple cameras and the first one that has a telephoto camera. And instead of two 12 megapixel ones, we have a 50 megapixel main camera with a large sensor. We have a 48 megapixel ultra wide and a 32 megapixel telephoto camera built in. Now, as for the selfie camera, we have a 10 megapixel on the Z Flip 5 compared to a 32 megapixel on the OPPO, and both of them can go wider like this. The OPPO is wider though, and with that, one really cool thing is the OPPO has a 2x mode as well, because you have 32 megapixels instead of 10. And that is nice if you want less distortion or less background, more focused on your face. And here is a selfie shot. You guys let me know what you think, but punching in here, You definitely see more detail on the OPPO. It's nice that you don't have a lot of over sharpening in my beard, so it still looks nice and natural. And then looking at the ultra-wide photos right here, we definitely have some differences. Now you guys saw the OPPO is labeled Hasselblad. They're using a lot of technology and tuning from that, so you guys could see we have a difference in a lot of the processing. The OPPO here is keeping a lot of the shadowing that we see from that window lighting being behind Vadim, whereas the Samsung is bringing everything up on his face. So we have that highlight roll off right here, where his whole face is really bright. And one thing that really surprised me is if we look out the window, Vadim, I don't think I've ever seen a phone that actually got what's outside that bright window. Wow. So the HDR, look, we actually see the sky, we see the AC in that little building there compared to this pure white on the Samsung. And then switching to the main lens, we have 50 megapixel compared to 12. Once again, difference in the processing, and same thing, we see all that sky there compared to white and then a part of that building. And now of course we have that 2x lens, 32 megapixel on the OPPO compared to having to use digital cropping. And right away, even in the background, I see a lot more of that texture. This time the Samsung is really cool compared to the OPPO, is staying a little bit more natural once again. And zooming in here on all this fine detail, you guys could see that we just have smearing over here compared to the actual text. So it's interesting how on this phone, there's a lot less artificial processing and sharpening going on in all of the photos that we've looked at so far. Now here's another 2x shot. This time it is outside. You guys let me know which you prefer in terms of colors and processing, but looking at the fine detail here, we have the sign on the OPPO where I can read everything, including the address, even though there's less artificial sharpening being added on to compensate. And then we have the Samsung there on the left side. We could still read everything, but that is at 2x. And here is a 10x shot, which is actually the maximum that the Samsung can do. Even without zooming in, you could see the difference in true detail. We look at the trees right here that look natural compared to this artificially kind of sharpened mess. And then going into the details, a lot of background detail, but then on the side, I mean, here is where you could see a difference. You can actually read everything here compared to here, which looks sharper, once again processing, but you can't read anything at all. So if you need to zoom in and get some detail, having that extra telephoto lens is obviously way better. And the OPPO can actually zoom in to 20 times compared to 10. So here's that difference in terms of zooming. And then of course you can always crop on both. And that just shows you the difference in the detail that you're able to capture. Now that telephoto mode is not only good for getting good detail, but it also helps for portraits. And I wanna mention that Hasselblad is not just a logo. OPPO actually mapped out Hasselblad's very expensive XCD30 and XCD65 lenses and looked at the bokeh to make their bokeh for portrait mode match those lenses. And here is a 1x portrait, kind of this medium lighting. You guys see we have some massive differences. The Samsung once again brought up all the shadows. His shirt looks kind of gray compared to having a darker scene, which it is right over there in that corner. And then the face, we have that same shadow roll off that we saw in the other location, compared to being all really flat. And then taking a look at the bokeh, we have some differences there. We actually have some curves on this side. You guys let me know what you think with this one. And then switching to this side right here, once again, you guys notice the differences that I already pointed out. But the cool thing is, because we have that telephoto camera, we can actually switch to that lens. And now you guys see we have some distortion with the 1x lens, which is normal, compared to really nice proportions using that 2x lens. Another cool thing is you can see some bokeh in the background because of the compression, and our little accent lighting is also more prominent instead of seeing a lot more of the background where we have some stuff on the floor over there. Now to show you guys an even better example, we've done this a few times. If you really want to get close up, you get some crazy warping compared to using a 2x lens, which everything looks a lot more natural. And the other thing I noticed with the OPPO, not only are they adjusting the colors and the processing, lowering that to make it more natural, but the blur definitely looks a lot more natural than what you have here, where it's just a bit too much. Now, going into some nighttime photos, we have this 1x shot right here. They both look very similar. We have some difference in lighting though. And then if we go in and take a look at the low light performance, definitely cleaner on that larger sensor with the OPPO. A bit more detail and almost no noise that is visible. And then I have one more shot right here of Vadim. This is with some of these lights turned off, using night mode on both. And if we go ahead and take a look, there is a big difference in detail between both of these. So it's definitely nice to have that higher megapixel count. So overall, I'm very impressed with the cameras. It's nice to have a foldable phone that does not lack in that area. And with that, the Hasselblad portrait mode and the tuning of the colors being a lot more natural. Same thing with the HDR, a lot more natural than you see. It is definitely nice. And now let's compare the cover screens. As I mentioned, with the Samsung, you have that glass on the front, so it kind of blends in. And then when I turn it on right here, we actually see a little bit of info, and then we can unlock it. And then now you can swipe through, and there's a couple different things you could do. So here we have our calendar, you have your weather, some alarms, some info for your activity. Just some basic things like that, some notification settings, and it is cool how it kind of blends in, and the size is large, but as you guys see, it is kind of like a horizontal screen, not typically what you have on the inside. So it's more of a half of a screen. Now on the OPPO, you guys see it's not as wide, but it is really tall. And the cool thing about this is it's pretty much like a mini screen of a phone, like back in the day when it had really small screens. And this vertical layout does give you some benefits. So first off, here, we have some notifications, some widgets. You can swipe down and get to your control center just like you can on the inside screen. The layout is very similar. You can adjust your brightness and then notifications from the bottom. And then we go to the side and we have all of these mini apps. So we have a ton of different stuff to choose from. And because of that layout, it makes it easy for a bunch of third-party apps to just work on this cover screen. We have Google Maps right here. I have not signed into that, but we can actually go in, zoom in, and use this full app just like you would on the inside. We have YouTube Music, Gmail, your texts, and it's basically the inside just on a smaller screen, and you don't have to open up your phone to get full access to full applications. And then of course the cover screen is nice because you can take selfies with the main cameras using this mode. And as you guys can see, I have an uncropped view with that vertical display with all of my settings, just like on the inside, compared to a basic one. And I mentioned the difference in the speaker grill, so now let's go ahead and compare the speakers. All right, guys, you let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. To me, they sound very similar. And now comparing the displays, as you guys can see, the OPPO does have a slightly larger 6.8-inch display compared to 6.7. Now, both these have really nice resolutions. They are sharp. Both go all the way up to 120 Hertz, so they are very smooth, and all the way down to 1 Hertz because they are LTPO, and that helps to save battery power, which is really nice. Now, one difference that we do have is that OPPO is now using a COE or a CO technology, and that makes it so they have a polarizer-free design on the screen. So not only do you not notice that screen protector, but when you're outside, if you're wearing sunglasses, let me go ahead and pop mine on here. The difference is pretty crazy. On a lot of these flip phones, or all of them, you actually get this rainbow effect where the polarizer is making a really kind of weird effect with the polarizer in the screen. So it's really rainbowy, very distracting, looks weird. Well, OPPO fixed that with their new technology, and it looks completely normal, just like you were not wearing sunglasses. So that is really nice when you are outside and it's bright. Now, another really cool thing is that the OPPO OPPO is using 1440 Hertz for the pulse width modulation compared to 240. That's a massive difference. So people that have sensitive eyes to the blinking or flashing of OLED displays, well, the OPPO is gonna really help with that compared to some people that are getting eye strain and issues like that with OLED refresh rates. Now, comparing HDR, we can see that the Samsung does have brighter brights where the HDR is popping more so than the OPPO. Detail level looks very similar between both. The video footage is nice and smooth, but we do have some differences in terms of the contrast, the saturation, and the tuning with these displays and the HDR playback. But in terms of that brightness, I'm not sure why that's happening because the previous test, the OPPO was brighter. Maybe YouTube just needs to update the app. Now, in terms of brightness, both these have very bright displays. I went ahead and I maxed out both of them, and as you guys could see, the OPPO in our studio is actually brighter. When you want to crank it up, they allow you to, instead of dimming where you have a large white screen. Heading outside, the OPPO also looks brighter when we have a bright display with a lot of whites, but it's interesting, when we go to a page that's mostly dark, that is when the Samsung actually gets really bright and can hit its advertised nits. And then going back inside here with that same page, now the OPPO's a lot brighter. So the Samsung, with its high brightness rating, it's really when you're in dark mode and outside when you can actually get the benefit of it compared to the OPPO, where they're giving it to you even inside in lighting like this. And now let's talk about batteries and charging. Now, both of these phones give you a USB Type-C cable to charge up, but of course Samsung does not give you a charging brick anymore, whereas OPPO gives you a charging brick in the box, and it is a fast charger. Now, the interesting thing is that the Z Flip 5 will charge up to 25 watts compared to 43 watts for the Find N3 Flip. With that, the Z Flip 5 has a 3,700 milliamp hour battery compared to 4,300 milliamp hour. So quite a bit more battery capacity. And even though the battery is larger when you are charging, the OPPO will hit 58% charge in 30 minutes compared to 50%. So you're not losing out on charging speeds either. So with all that said, the Z Flip 5 is a great foldable phone, but if you want something that is much more of a flagship level experience while also having the ability to fold down and become much more compact, the Find N3 Flip is definitely the better phone. You have that large cover screen, you have a triple camera layout with that telephoto camera, a crease that is way less noticeable as well, and a large battery capacity with this nice design. So it's cool to see companies really pushing forward the design. The Find N2 Flip had a nice big improvement, and now with the N3 Flip, they've stepped it up even more, especially with what you could do on the front and its camera capabilities. But you guys let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. Go ahead and click that circle above to subscribe. Check out one of those great videos right over there. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.